Welcome to an introduction to journal publishing at the Geological Society, originally streamed live as a webinar. This video is a resource for authors looking to publish in our journals, including expert peer-reviewed tips from the editor-in-chief of the Quarterly Journal of Engineering Geology and Hydrogeology, Cherith Moses.
Let me introduce our speakers. I'm David, and I'm joined by my colleagues Lucy, Bethan, and Charlie. We work at the Geological Society Publishing House and do a lot of work on the journals at the sort of editorial and publishing development end. We are very pleased to be joined by Professor Cherith Moses, who is, among her other titles, the editor-in-chief on the Quarterly Journal of Engineering Geology and Hydrogeology, or QJEGH for short. So that's one of our acronyms out of the way. And for today's presentation, we're hoping to go through all the main stages of journals publishing fairly briefly. We will highlight some key hints and tips that we think will be helpful to authors and which have been informed by our experiences and feedback from our editors. So first up, some items to consider before you as an author submit your paper to a journal, and perhaps even earlier in the process than that, during the writing and the planning phase. It may seem obvious, but know your journal, know the journal that you're submitting to, read the scope, read the published papers or find out information about published papers, check the article types. It may not just be research papers that the journal accepts, there may be reviews or commentaries or perspective pieces. And have a look out for any thematic collections that are open and that your paper may fit the theme of. And really with all of these things, just think about how your research and how your paper fits with the journal. And if it's appropriate, you may wish to consider tweaking or adapting some of your paper to fit with the journal's requirements. Editors will pick up on these things where authors have considered them, and they will be able to see that. And papers that are outside of scope, in particular the journals, are often rejected out of hand. Another thing to consider will be open access. At the Geological Society, our approach broadly is one of author choice. So all of our journals offer an open access option as well as a non-open access option. But for you as authors, we recommend thinking about any guidelines or any mandates that you may have from your funder or your institution. And obviously you can find out information about the models of open access that a journal offers and make sure that fits with any requirements that you have. You may also wish to consider different metrics, whether it's review times or readership figures or citation levels, things like site score or impact factor if they're important to you. And at submission stage, it's worth having a look at any style or formatting guidelines. For the Geological Society journals, we do accept format-free papers at submission, but formatting and style guidelines will need to be followed at revision stage. So something to consider at the outset there. And lastly, just a note on peer review. Good quality peer review can obviously elevate a research paper, but it does take time. And we recommend allowing time ahead of your kind of date for publication when you would like to be publishing your research for that peer review and any revisions to take place. Typically at the Geological Society, our journals, between submission of the paper and a first decision is roughly 2 to 3 months, depending on different factors. So just something to consider there. Obviously, if you have any questions ahead of time, you can be in contact with us. Each of our journals has an inbox which we monitor. So we're happy to address any questions in advance. And of course, all of this information that I've been describing here is available on the journal homepages that are hosted on a Lyle platform.
So I'm gonna take over from David and just go through the sort of practical parts about how to submit your manuscript. So when you've picked a journal, the easiest way to find out how to submit to that journal is to go to that journal's About page and click Submit an Article. This will take you to the Editorial Manager platform, which looks like this screenshot. And you'll need to either register for an account or log into your account. And to do this, you'll need to also connect your ORCID ID. If you don't have an ORCID ID, it's very easy to just create one, and it's free. And it will function as sort of an online resume of your work and publications. So it's definitely worth having, especially for people who have more common and less Googleable names. To submit to one of our journals, you'll need to include all the required files as separated files. So for some of our journals, we do require a cover letter. For all of our journals, we obviously require a manuscript, which will need to be a Word document or an open doc. And then we would ask you to attach each table and figure individually and separately. And the reason we ask for that is just because it's easier to make sure earlier in the process that we have all the high quality files that we need, so that we don't have to keep emailing you backwards and forwards later on in the process when we're moving to press and we need better quality versions. Next slide, please. So once you've attached all of your files, you'll be asked to tag your manuscript into particular classifications, which will look like what's on the screen now. Do take care when you're selecting these classifications and try to make them as specific as possible, because we use these at several stages in the process. Firstly, to match you to an editorial board member with appropriate expertise, and then later to index your paper in our system so that people can search various subject tags and find your paper within them. You'll be asked to put in your all your co-authors. Please make sure they're in the same order and format as in your manuscript. This is important for downstream indexing purposes, like through dimensions and scopus. And we also ask that you put in what contribution they had to the project, just so that there's transparency for everyone reading your paper. And also at this stage, we'll ask you to declare if you have any AI use. So it's important that you let us know if you've used any AI, so we can make sure that you do it in a way that's compliant with our policies. And you can have a look at those on our website. We have a special page for AI in publishing. Next slide, please. Information that you've entered, we'll make sure all the files are there. We'll ensure everything's in the right format. So, for example, we will check to make sure that you've used line numbers and that you've used an author date referencing style. I should mention that you don't need to worry too much about making sure that your paper is in the perfect style. Just so long as we have author date, that's fine at this stage. We'll clean it up later in the process. That we have good quality figures, and that the equations that we have are editable, so not pictures. Word math type is fine, and so is LaTeX. I should also mention that during the revision stage, we will also ask for a track changes version of your manuscript between versions. Oh, I'm just seeing that not everyone can see the slides. Can all the speakers see the slides?
Yeah, I can see them.
Okay.
Someone in the audience can't see them.
Okay. You should have the link to a longer version, which will have all of this information in. And you'll also be able to watch this back. So for anyone who can't see the slides, just try to follow along with the longer version at the moment, and we'll try and sort out the tech later.
Yeah, I think most people can see them. It might just be one or two people having technical problems.
Okay, good. Yeah, so during revisions, we'll need a track changes version showing the difference between the two versions in your manuscript. And this is where we'll also check to make sure that we have all reprinting permissions, and that you've kind of responded to all the comments you received from the reviewers. So those are the checks that we do in-house. And now I'm going to hand over to Cherith, who will talk about the peer review process and what the editors do with the scientific editing.
Thank you. So, what happens to your paper once you've submitted it? Well, if it doesn't pass the technical checks, it'll come back to you very quickly. Assuming that it does pass the technical checks, then the journal manager will assign your paper to one of the senior editors, and that could be the chief editor or one of the assistant editors. So they make an initial assessment of your paper, essentially checking that it's within the scope of the journal, but also checking that the science is robust. And at that point, if it's not scientifically robust, the paper will be rejected. But assuming that it is and is of good quality, then the senior editor will assign your paper to an editorial board member who has relevant expertise in the subject of your paper. So they're known as the handling editor, and it's their responsibility to ensure that your paper is thoroughly reviewed and in a supportive way to help you to improve the quality of your paper. So the first thing the handling editor does is they will also review the paper, looking at the scientific quality, and make a decision then on who to send it out to for review. So the next step in the process is that the handling editor will assign the manuscript to at least 2 external peer reviewers who have quite close expertise matching the subject or the topic of your paper. So these are the people who do the very, very detailed review, line by line. They will look at the overall scientific quality. They'll look at different aspects of the structure, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. And so they do a very detailed review, and they submit a recommendation back to the handling editor. So once all the reviews are in, the handling editor then looks at the reviews, looks at the decisions that have been made against their own initial assessment of the paper, and they will then take a decision on how to proceed with the manuscript. So it's highly unlikely that your paper will be accepted first time around. It's most common that some revisions are required, and that's simply just to improve the quality of the paper. So what happens once the editor makes the decision is that they could ask you for minor revisions, major revisions, or if the revisions are thought to be more than major, and that could be something like, you might be required to collect an additional data set or run a new set of analyses, and that would be more than major revisions. So if that's the case, then the decision would be that the paper would be rejected, but you'd have the opportunity to resubmit it, and you would receive all the reviewer feedback to help you do that. If the scale of the changes really are too great, then at that point the paper would be rejected. But the most common decisions are minor revision or major revision. So once that decision is taken by the handling editor, the manuscript will come back to you, and you will be given a period of time. There'll be a deadline for you to submit your amended manuscript. If you're not able to make the deadline that you've been given, you just need to let the journal managing manager know, and you can rearrange for another submission date that suits you better, suits your schedule better. So you'll be given a period of time, you'll have all of the detailed reviews and the decision, and so then you need to just amend your manuscript. You need to respond to the reviewer comments. Each individual reviewer comment requires a response so that you can show the editor and the reviewers how you've actually addressed the changes. And that would all be on a marked up manuscript. So once you've done all that, then you submit your paper back again through Editorial Manager, and then with revisions, they go back to the original senior editor who handled your paper. So they will then send it back to the handling editor. If the revisions that you were required to do were only very minor, it's quite possible that the senior editor or the handling editor can easily take a decision, because it'll be very quick and easy to assess if you've addressed the minor revisions. And so that speeds the process up a little bit. If you've been asked to do major revisions, or if your paper's been rejected and you've been asked to resubmit it, then the original handling editor will send your paper back out to the original external reviewers. And so they are asked to check that the amendments that you've made, that they're agreeable with those and that they suit the requirements. So once that process is completed for major revisions or reject and resubmit, then the reviewers submit their decision back to the handling editor, who again will review everything and take a final decision. So usually with minor revisions, the decision at that point would be to accept, and the paper goes through to the production office. Sometimes with major revisions or reject and resubmit, further revisions may be required to your paper. And usually, if you've had to make major revisions in the first instance, it's highly likely there might be a few further minor revisions that would need to be made. So if you're requested to make further revisions to your already revised manuscript, then it'll come back to you again, and you'll be given a deadline to submit your further revised manuscript. And remember that this is a supportive process, and that it's intended to help you to improve the overall quality of your paper. So don't be upset if it comes back asking for major revisions, or indeed if it's a reject and resubmit. The purpose is to improve the quality of the work. So if you've had to revise your revision, it just goes back, you resubmit it, it goes back through the process, and hopefully then the decision at that point will be to accept. And once the paper is accepted, it's sent off to the production office, where the publishing house staff check all the permissions, they do a line edit, they typeset the paper, and it's usually available online first within a couple of weeks of that final accept decision. So that's the workflow, and it can take some time. And the other thing to remember is that editors and reviewers are all doing this work voluntarily. And so it can take a while to get through the review process, but it's worth it in the end, because ultimately it will hopefully lead to publication of your work. So next slide, please. Now then, here's some of the things that we consider when we're assessing the paper during its review process, and that's from the senior editor through to the handling editor and through to the external peer reviewers. Most geoscience papers are location-based, and it's important to remember that you're writing for an international audience. So make sure that the title provides the geographical location of your study. One of the first things that we look at, apart from whether the paper's within the scope of the journal, is the quality of the science and the contribution that it makes to knowledge in the field. So is it novel? Does it make a useful contribution? In terms of the actual content of the paper, you need to check with the journal that you're submitting to what their page length requirement is, because quite often we get papers that are significantly longer than they might be required to be, and so one element of feedback is to reduce the length of the paper. In terms of the content of the paper itself, the abstract just needs to highlight the key findings, not to go into too much detail, but to set them in the context of the area or the topic. The structure of the paper is really important, and that's something that we do look at in detail. It's very important that the paper has a clear introduction, that the research question or problem is very clearly stated, and that it's set in the context of the relevant literature. So there needs to be a little bit of a literature review at the start of the paper. And that helps to understand the importance of the work. For a study that is site-based or location-based, it's important that there's a site description section and that we check to make sure that that is sufficiently detailed and adequate in how it describes the site. Whether you're using primary or secondary data, it's important that you adequately describe and explain how you've selected various different data sets. Important as well that you say something about the quality and or the resolution of the data sets. The methodology is very important, and we do check that that is scientifically robust. And we check to make sure that it's clearly set out in such a way that the work could be replicated if someone decided to do that. And also in the methodology, whether you're using field, lab, remote sense data, secondary data, if you're using statistical analyses or other analytical methods, they also need to be clearly set out, clearly described, clearly explained. So once you've done that, then the next step is to make sure that your results are very clearly presented. And this is something that we do check. We check to ensure that the results are clearly presented, and also that the tables and figures, if they're used, are of sufficient number and also of sufficient quality. The other thing that we look for is to ensure that the analytical methods, whether they're statistical or some other method, are appropriate. So that sets the context for your work, and then the meat of the paper is in the discussion. And this is where you will be needing to discuss the results of your paper in the context of the wider literature. And that's important because that indicates to the reader the contribution that your work is making to the field or to that particular area of the field. So the discussion really is an important section, and it should set your results in the context of the broader literature on the topic, and also lead the reader towards the conclusions. And the conclusions should be concise and clear. That really is quite a short section in the paper, but most importantly, the conclusions must be supported by the data that are presented, and that is something that reviewers do look at in some detail. So one of the final jobs, when you've got your manuscript ready to submit, and this is quite a tedious task, is to ensure that all the references that are in the manuscript appear in the bibliography and vice versa. Now, I know there are various referencing softwares that you can use to do this kind of thing. I usually do it manually. Because the software packages can miss out any references that you've used in tables and figures. So don't forget, if you've made reference to someone else's work or other people's work in tables or figures, that those references also have to go into your bibliography at the end. So these are just, these are the things that, that the handling editor and that the external reviewers check for. We scrutinise all the manuscripts, so they're scrutinised at least 3 or 4 times, but also part of that process is to provide you with comments and suggested improvements, and these can be quite detailed, but when you get your reviewer comments back, You need to go through them step by step and address each of them. And remember that this is a supportive process, and the purpose of the detailed reviewer comments is to help you to improve the quality of your paper so that when it's finally published, it's as good as it can possibly be. Thank you.
Great. So upon acceptance, the editorial office will check everything is in order, such as the co-authors have all confirmed authorship and that the figure permissions have all been received. And if you have high resolution figure files that we don't already have, this is the point to send them over to us. You'll receive a link to your publication license in our copyright management platform called Chronos Hub. And you'll choose whether the author or the employer owns the copyright. And if you're unsure, you can check with your manager. You'll also be able to decide if you want to publish open access or not, and you'll be instructed to pay an article processing charge if appropriate. Your paper is then passed on to the production department, where the production editor will arrange for the accepted manuscript to be posted. And as Cherith mentioned, this is up online within 2 weeks. All manuscripts are edited for style and language, and queries are inserted for missing information. Our typesetters then create a PDF proof of your paper, which is sent over to the corresponding author for review. And this is your last chance to make any minor amends and respond to the queries. Some top tips: make sure you annotate your PDF using the comments facility, or provide us the list of corrections using the line numbers. Don't send back a new manuscript file or edit the PDF, as we can't use this. So at this point, corrections will go back to the typesetters, and then these are then checked by the production editor in-house before publishing your article in an issue in the LAR collection and on Geoscience World. The manuscript will then be sent downstream to a variety of indexing services, depending on which journal you're publishing in. And these include Crossref, Google Scholar, Geobase, Scopus, and Clarivate Science Citation Index. Thank you. Next slide. So once your paper is published, it's great to let everyone know about it. So the easiest way to do this is on a LinkedIn post or other social media platforms. It's a good idea to include a brief description and highlight the key points of your findings. If your paper is newsworthy, it's worth talking to your employer about a press release. And you could also write a blog, which makes your findings easy to digest. And there is a free tool called Altmetrics that shows you the online shares and mentions of your article. And the link to this is down the bottom. And it's a great tool to get insight into the impact of your paper. And there's also a link here at the bottom, which shows where all of our papers are indexed in detail. Thank you.
So the Geological Society offers routes to open access publication, which are compliant with major funder mandates. Most journals published by the Society operate a hybrid open access publication model, whereby authors can choose to publish open access should they have available funding, or they qualify for one of the Society's institutional read and publish agreements. Though the Society does also have a fully open access journal called Earth Science Systems and Society. And the article processing charge for open access publication covers the costs associated with publication, including production costs that Lucy's spoken about, hosting costs and staff time. And for all of our publishing activity, any surplus income is fed back into the other activities of the Geological Society, and they serve the wider geoscience community. In terms of some discounts and waivers, we do have a number of options available, including standard discounts for our Geological Society Fellows or members of the EAGE and AAG for our co-owned journals, Petroleum Geoscience and Geochemistry, Exploration, Environment Analysis. For our fully open access publications, we offer full waivers for authors from lower and middle income countries as part of the Research for Life scheme. And we do also have those read and publish agreements that I mentioned, and those are in place with institutions around the world, and they allow corresponding authors from institutions to publish in our publications at no cost to themselves. and that includes authors submitting to Earth Science Systems and Society. So we really encourage you to have a look at our website to find out if your institution is eligible and if you could submit your paper under one of our agreements. Next slide, please. So the three of our journals, Journal of the Geological Society, Petroleum Geoscience, and the Quarterly Journal of Engineering Geology and Hydrogeology, we offer annual early career awards for the top paper published in each of those journals from an early career author. And there are a number of basic eligibility criteria, and they vary slightly across the three publications. So you can find out a bit more information on those criteria by following the link on the slides. But to be considered for these awards, authors just need to indicate interest and eligibility when submitting manuscript via Editorial Manager. And you'll be reminded of this at acceptance, and you can contact the Journal Editorial Office with a request to be nominated. And prize-winning authors each receive a certificate and a Geological Society special publication of their choice, as well as an open access waiver, which can be used on a paper submitted within 2 years of receiving the award to the winning journal. And for the journals Petroleum Geoscience and the Quarterly Journal of Engineering Geology and Hydrogeology, the early career award winners are also invited to join the journal editorial boards. So that's a really exciting opportunity.
And I think it's back to me. I had some technical issues there, but hopefully you can hear me again now. Sorry about that, everyone. So that is it in terms of our presentation slides. Our last slide here is a reminder about the staff at Publishing House who are on hand to help with the publication process and to liaise with authors and editors and contributors on publishing in our journals and also our books. We haven't said too much about books today and tried to keep things focused, but the longer slide deck that was shared does have some further information on the Society's books publishing process, and colleagues and registrants, people on the call may be aware of the Special Publications series, the Engineering Special Publications series, and other of our book series. If that is something that is of interest to people on the call, either editing a volume or contributing as an author or a reviewer, then please do just reach out to either Catherine, our commissioning editor, or myself, and our contact details are on the slide here. We would be very happy to speak with you and hear about any ideas that you might have for publishing books. But we'll leave it there. Otherwise, I think we can just say thank you to everyone involved and everyone who's joined, and I'll wrap this up.